Have you ever felt like you totally understand English when you hear it, but when you actually try to speak, the words just get completely stuck? Yeah, it's super frustrating. Today, we are going to fix that. We're moving way beyond basic grammar and diving into how to actually express your true self, your deep thoughts, and your real emotions. By the end of this, you'll know exactly how to hold your own in any conversation, no matter how complex the topic gets. When we think about someone who speaks English at a super high level, like a C1 or C2 level, what usually comes to mind? Do you picture someone who talks really fast? Or maybe someone who uses these massive, complicated words that nobody actually uses in real life? The truth is, advanced English is not just about sounding smart or flexing your vocabulary. It's about expressing your ideas clearly, picking up on the subtle vibes or meanings behind what people say, and just communicating naturally. It's about having the confidence to talk about life, culture, society, your career, and even your deepest emotions without missing a beat. If you have ever searched for advanced English speaking practice to sound like a native, you are in exactly the right place. Because today, we are going to cover all of that. We are going to explore how to level up your daily communication, how to handle disagreements without making things awkward, and how to talk about your personal growth and future goals. So, let's just get comfortable and dive right into it. Let's start with something that affects all of us every single day. Habits. Think about your everyday routine for a second. How often are you actually exposing yourself to English? Are you throwing on a podcast while you make breakfast? Are you reading a few pages of a book before you go to sleep? Or here is a weird one, but it works. Do you talk to yourself in English while you are driving or cooking? These tiny, everyday habits might seem like they don't matter much, but they are actually the secret cheat code to building fluency way faster than you'd expect. Language experts and researchers actually say that getting consistent, daily exposure to English is way more effective than sitting down and torturing yourself with a massive 3-hour study session once a week. Your brain learns a language through repetition, context, and meaning. The more you hear natural, everyday expressions, the faster your brain stops seeing them as a foreign language and starts treating them as something totally normal and automatic. Think about it. When you hear phrases like on a regular basis or as far as I'm concerned, do they feel natural to you? Or does your brain pause to translate them into your native language first? At the advanced level, your main goal is figuring out how to think in English and stop translating in your head. You want to reach that sweet spot where English ideas just pop into your mind effortlessly. And the only way to get there is by surrounding yourself with natural English, exactly like what we are doing right now. Now, let's talk about how modern life is totally changing the way we communicate. This is something everyone around the globe can relate to, whether you live in the US, Europe, Asia, or anywhere else. Over the last 10 years, the way we talk to each other has shifted dramatically. Think about how many of your conversations happen through text messages, voice notes, or quick video calls. We are constantly sharing our thoughts instantly, sometimes without even really thinking about what we are saying. And because we are so used to communicating fast, we tend to use super short sentences, basic slang, or just fire off an emoji to show how we feel. But here is the catch. When it comes to high-level English, you have to go beyond those quick, simple text message replies. You need the ability to express complex opinions, explain your reasoning, and talk about heavy issues using a clear structure. For example, instead of just saying something basic like, "Technology is helpful," an advanced speaker might balance their thought. They might say, "Technology has definitely changed the way I communicate. On one hand, it allows me to stay in touch with people so easily. On the other hand, I sometimes feel like conversations have become way less personal." Notice that structure? On one hand. And on the other hand. Using transitions like that instantly makes you sound more organized, mature, and fluent. Let's shift gears for a second and talk about the other half of communication, which honestly, a lot of people totally ignore. Active listening. Speaking is really only half the battle. The other half is your ability to listen carefully, catch the tiny details, and respond in a way that actually makes sense. Have you ever talked to someone and realized they aren't actually listening to you? They are literally just waiting for their turn to speak. They aren't processing your words. They are just formatting their next sentence in their head. Active listening means you are paying attention to the words, but also the tone, the intention, and the emotion behind the message. When you are learning English, this skill is a game changer. It helps you understand fast talkers, pick up on idioms, and catch sarcastic or subtle meanings. It also helps you respond like a real human being. For example, if your friend says, "I have been so overwhelmed lately," a basic response would just be, "Okay," or "That's too bad." But an advanced, emotionally intelligent speaker wouldn't say that. They might say, "I'm so sorry to hear that. Is it because of work?" This shows empathy, understanding, and flow. In real life, native speakers use phrases all the time like, "I can totally relate to that," or "That caught me off guard," or "I see your point." These phrases make your conversations feel warm and connected. So, picking right up where we left off, let's talk about expressing complex ideas. At the advanced level, it's really not just about memorizing a bunch of difficult vocabulary words to try and sound smart. It's about using the language to communicate thoughts that are layered, nuanced, and actually meaningful. Think about this for a second. When you are chatting in your native language about something deep, maybe you are discussing a trending topic on social media, relationship drama, or personal growth. You don't just speak in black and white. You probably use tons of nuanced expressions without even realizing it. You might say things like, "Well, it's not that simple," or "It really depends on the context," or "There is way more to it than that." To reach that C1 or C2 level in English, you need to start bringing that same level of maturity to your second language. You want to use phrases like, "It's a bit more complicated than it seems," or "I understand where you are coming from, but I see it differently." Using statements like these shows that you have clarity and depth. It helps you actually participate in deep, meaningful conversations instead of just staying on the surface with superficial small talk. And speaking of depth, Let's talk about something that shapes our confidence more than anything else. Our daily routines. A lot of people totally underestimate how their everyday habits influence their ability to speak a language. The truth is, confidence does not come from being perfect. Perfection is honestly kind of a scam. Confidence comes from consistency. The more you expose yourself to English daily, the more natural and effortless your speech becomes. There is actually a super useful advanced sentence pattern that native speakers use all the time to describe this exact thing. It's the more structure. You might say, the more I practice, the more confident I feel. Or, the more I listen, the more natural everything sounds. Or even, the more I challenge myself, the more progress I notice. This specific structure is everywhere in natural English, and mastering it will instantly make you sound way more fluent. But what happens when things aren't just casual and easy? Let's talk about an essential skill that truly separates intermediate learners from advanced speakers. Handling disagreements and conflict politely. Look, nobody really loves arguing, and in a lot of cultures, people avoid conflict entirely. But in English, especially in a professional setting or when you're just doing your daily English conversation practice for speaking fluently, it is incredibly important to know how to disagree without sounding rude, aggressive, or like you're trying to start a fight. Instead of just blurting out, "I disagree," or "you're wrong," an advanced speaker knows how to soften the blow. You could say, "I see your point, but I'm not completely convinced." Or, "That is an interesting perspective, though I would probably interpret it differently." Or even, "I respect your opinion, but I have a slightly different take." These expressions show that you are confident and clear, but also respectful. They are the ultimate cheat code for navigating tricky situations without making things awkward. Now, if you really want to grab someone's attention and sound totally authentic, you have to master the art of storytelling. This is something a lot of advanced learners totally sleep on. We all love a good story, right? At high levels, one of the best ways to show off your fluency is by telling stories smoothly. Whether you are talking about something crazy that happened to you yesterday, a huge challenge you faced last year, or just a funny childhood memory. When you tell a story well in English, you are showing that you can control your verb tenses, handle transitions, express emotions, and use descriptive words all at the same time. To keep people hooked, you want to use natural transitions. Things like, "Let me tell you about something insane that happened recently," or "I'll never forget the moment when." And as you move through the story, you use phrases like, "At first, I didn't really understand what was going on," or "But looking back, I realized that it taught me a valuable lesson." It makes your English sound rich, dynamic, and incredibly human. Let's dive into another thing that will instantly upgrade your English. Ditching basic words and using precise vocabulary. At the advanced level, you don't need to use overly complicated, academic words that make you sound like a walking dictionary. You just need words that are accurate. For example, instead of saying something is very important, try saying it's crucial or essential. Instead of saying very big, say it's massive or substantial. Instead of saying very small, say it's tiny or minimal. And this is especially true when we talk about our emotions. Intermediate speakers usually stick to basic emotional words. They say things like, I am happy, I am sad, or I am angry. But let's be real, human emotions are way more complicated than that. Advanced speakers use layered words to capture exactly how they feel. Instead of just saying you're sad, you might say, I've been feeling a bit mentally drained lately, or I'm just feeling completely overwhelmed. Instead of saying you are happy, you might say, I'm genuinely fulfilled, or I'm cautiously optimistic about this opportunity. Having this kind of emotional precision is such a powerful tool. It deepens your conversations and makes your English feel incredibly alive and authentic. It allows you to express your true identity, your internal struggles, and your real personality. Because at the end of the day, advanced English isn't just about sounding correct. It's about being your authentic self in another language. So, picking right up where we left off, let's talk about being your authentic self in English. But let's be completely real, you can't always talk to your boss or your professor the exact same way you talk to your best friend. That brings us to another huge milestone for advanced learners. Navigating professional English without sounding like a completely different person or using cringy corporate jargon. In the workplace, you constantly have to give feedback, share ideas, and sometimes disagree with your coworkers. Giving constructive feedback is honestly super tricky, even for native speakers. You want to be helpful, but you definitely don't want to sound rude or bossy. If someone pitches an idea and it's just not going to work, an intermediate speaker might just bluntly say, I don't like it, or that is a bad idea. But if you want to keep things professional and respectful, you need to soften your language. You could say something like, I really appreciate the idea, though I have some concerns about how practical it is for this project. Or, let's take a closer look at the data before we make a final decision. See the difference? You are still saying no, but you are doing it with total grace and respect. And while we are on the topic of work, let's talk about the absolute chaos of modern life for a second. We live in a world where we are constantly glued to our screens, bombarded with notifications, and pressured by this endless hustle culture. It is so incredibly easy to feel completely burned out. Advanced English speakers know exactly how to express this mental load clearly. Instead of just giving a basic I am tired, they express exactly what kind of tired they are. You might say, I've been juggling multiple responsibilities lately, and I just feel completely mentally drained. Or, I feel like I'm constantly racing against time, so I'm trying to reset my priorities. If you have ever watched tutorials on how to speak English fluently and confidently at work, you probably know that part of being a confident communicator is knowing how to protect your peace. Being able to express your emotional boundaries is a massive flex. When you are stretched too thin, you have to learn how to say no without feeling guilty. You can use phrases like, I'm trying not to overextend myself right now, or I really value the offer, but I'll have to decline so I can focus on my current projects. It shows that you are self-aware, mature, and totally in control of your time and your energy. Which actually leads right into our next big topic. personal development and mindset. In our generation, everyone is obsessed with glowing up, right? We are all actively trying to become the best versions of ourselves. But talking about your goals requires some pretty high-level vocabulary. Instead of just saying, "I want to be better," an advanced speaker talks about their long-term vision. You might say, "I'm really focused on creating a lifestyle that aligns with my core values," or "I'm actively trying to step outside of my comfort zone and challenge myself more intellectually." And here is the ultimate reality check about personal growth. Motivation is basically a myth. You are not going to wake up every single day feeling super hyped to study English, hit the gym, or work on your side hustle. That is exactly where discipline comes in. Advanced speakers talk about this shift in mindset all the time. You could say, "I've realized that discipline is way more reliable than motivation." Or, "I'm working on building daily habits that actually keep me accountable." It's all about playing the long game instead of just searching for quick, temporary results. But while we are out here grinding and trying to achieve all our goals, we also have to talk about something equally important: self-compassion. Why are we always so incredibly harsh on ourselves? We expect absolute perfection, and when we mess up, we beat ourselves up over it. At the C1 or C2 level, you should be able to articulate how you are unlearning that toxic behavior. You can say, "I'm really trying to let go of these impossible standards I set for myself." Or, "I'm giving myself permission to rest without feeling guilty about it." Or my personal favorite, "I'm learning to celebrate my progress instead of constantly obsessing over my mistakes." Another huge part of connecting with people and showing that emotional intelligence is reading between the lines. At advanced levels, people don't always say exactly what they mean. Sometimes they drop hints, or they are just trying to be polite. For example, if someone says, "Don't worry about it," sometimes it means it is actually fine. But depending on their tone or body language, it could mean they are secretly super annoyed but just don't have the energy to argue about it. Or if someone says, "Well, that's an interesting perspective," it might mean they completely disagree with you, but they are just trying to keep things diplomatic. Understanding these subtle, hidden meanings is the ultimate proof that you are genuinely fluent. It helps you navigate awkward situations smoothly, prevents stupid misunderstandings, and ensures you and the person you are talking to are always on the same page. Being able to pick up on these nuances and set your own boundaries makes your English sound so much more human. You aren't just reciting a textbook anymore. You are actually connecting, adapting, and flowing with the conversation. So, picking right up where we left off, let's get into the deep stuff. One of the most beautiful parts of reaching a high level of English is being able to talk about the actual human experience. Life is super unpredictable, and we all go through major changes, crazy setbacks, and moments of total uncertainty. Being able to express how those moments shaped you is a total game changer for your fluency. Think about a massive failure or a huge disappointment you've experienced. It's never easy to talk about, right? But advanced speakers know how to reflect on those moments and find the hidden lessons. Instead of just complaining, you might say something like, That experience completely knocked me down at first, but looking back, it forced me to grow in ways I never expected. Or, it was a massive setback, but it honestly taught me a level of resilience I didn't even know I had. And speaking of resilience, we have to talk about navigating the unknown. Especially in your 20s and 30s, it feels like nothing is guaranteed. People constantly stress about their career paths, their relationships, and what their future is actually going to look like. When you are discussing these heavy topics, you want to use language that feels grounded and mature. You could say, "I really don't have everything figured out right now, but I'm just taking things one day at a time." Or, "I am trying to learn how to embrace uncertainty rather than letting it totally paralyze me." This also brings us into the realm of personal philosophy. Everyone has their own unique way of viewing the world, and at the C1 or C2 level, you need to know how to express yours clearly. If you are having one of those deep, 2 a.m. conversations with a friend, you might drop some philosophical insights. You could say, "I've started to realize that happiness isn't really something you just chase. It's something you have to actively cultivate every single day." Or, "I genuinely believe that human connection and empathy are way more valuable than any kind of material success." These kinds of statements make you sound insightful, reflective, and incredibly wise. And while we are talking about connection, let's look at how to build stronger, more meaningful relationships using your words. A huge part of being emotionally fluent is knowing how to make the people around you feel truly seen and supported. When a friend comes to you with a problem or is just totally venting about their life, you don't want to just stare at them and say, "Wow, that sucks." You want to offer real comfort. You can say things like, "I can only imagine how incredibly frustrating that must feel for you." Or, "I completely understand why that would bother you so much. I'm here for you if you need to talk it out." Expressing deep, genuine gratitude is another massive part of building relationships. It's not just about throwing around a quick thanks. It's about making sure people know you genuinely appreciate them. You could say, "I really don't take your support for granted," or "I genuinely appreciate how patient you have been with me through all of this." Using this kind of heartfelt language builds trust and creates a super strong emotional bond with the people in your life. Let's also talk briefly about cultural awareness. Our background completely shapes the way we see the world, the way we communicate, and even our sense of humor. When you are talking with international friends or coworkers, being able to reflect on those cultural differences is a massive flex. You might say, "I've noticed that in my culture, people tend to communicate way more indirectly to avoid offending anyone." Or, "It's so fascinating to see how different societies define what success actually looks like." Having this level of global awareness makes your conversations so much richer and more interesting. Finally, as we wrap up this massive deep dive, let's talk about the absolute most important skill for sounding completely fluent and native. Using natural conversation fillers and transitions. When you are thinking of what to say next, your brain naturally needs a second to catch up. Intermediate learners often panic when there is a pause, or they just say a million times. But advanced speakers use natural fillers. If you are trying to gather your thoughts, you can just say, let me think about that for a second, or well, the thing is. Or to be completely honest with you. These little phrases act as a bridge. They give your brain a second to breathe while keeping the conversation flowing perfectly. When you combine these natural fillers with all the deep vocabulary, the emotional intelligence, and the complex structures we've talked about today, you unlock a whole new level of communication. You have just spent all this time diving into high-level, advanced English, and that is absolutely huge. Building this kind of fluency does not happen overnight. It comes from showing up, being curious, and pushing past the awkward phase where you feel like you are making mistakes. Every time you practice, you are literally rewiring your brain and getting one step closer to becoming that effortlessly confident speaker you want to be. Your voice matters, your thoughts are valuable, and the world absolutely needs to hear what you have to say. So keep practicing, keep challenging yourself, and never be afraid to step outside of your comfort zone. I am so incredibly proud of the work you put in today, and I know you are going to crush your English goals. If this deep dive helped you level up your communication skills, please make sure to hit that like button and definitely subscribe to Story Nest English Academy for way more content just like this. Keep growing, keep practicing, and I'll catch you in the next one.